All right, welcome to Draft to Print. My name is Warren Krause. I'll be a co-instructor to this course. When you start getting into this competency, you're going to find out math is a huge component to this competency. When you're looking at fractions, decimal equivalents, we're going to be using them basically on a daily basis, or you're actually looking at prints, and when you're actually measuring. We're going to start on Chapter 2. You've already had one module helping you go through fractions and decimals. This is kind of a review. So Chapter 2, as you look into that chart, Chapter 2, there's 15 fractions. You might as well just go through and memorize these fractions to decimal equivalents. It's going to make the competency go by a lot easier. Once you have them memorized, it's going to make, like I said, it's going to make everything a lot easier. I mean, you can even just write these down on flashcards. However you want to do it, memorize 2 to 3 a day, however you want to do it. But this will make your life a lot easier throughout this competency the sooner that you get these memorized. So the ones I want you to really focus on is 1/16 equals 0.0625, 1/8, 0.125, 3/16, 0.1875, quarter inch, 0.25, 5/16, and so on. I have them all written here on the board. They're also in your book. There's a chart here that converts them over for you. But the 1/16, 1/8, 3/16, so basically every graduation of a 1/16 of an inch up to 1. Memorize them. It's going to make, like I said, it's going to make the rest of this competency go by a lot easier. This unit here, and why they're important, because a lot of times on your prints, they're in decimal form. For example, 0.625, what is that? How do you go measure that on your tape measure? You got to convert that over to a fraction, which is 5/8. And these can be put anywhere. What I mean by anywhere, for example, it could be a whole number in front of them. It might be, for example, it might be 11.625. So that's 11 and 5/8. So when you go to measure. So these can be put with whole numbers also. But get these memorized. You're going to get hammered on probably every unit throughout this whole competency. So get them memorized. Like I said, just make things a lot easier. So review of measurement. When we start looking, we're going to be using, typically what we have in our shop is all U.S. customary English standard tape measures. So you're going to be looking at the 1 inch, the 1/16 graduate tape measures, basically the most commonly used measuring device on our shop floor. So that's what we're going to focus on. Some companies do use metric. When they do use metric, they'll use metric tape measures, so it eliminates the conversion process from metric to English. So I also have a couple other videos besides this video in here, but the main thing is get these fractions to decimal equivalents memorized. It's going to make it a lot easier. Now I'm going to kind of break down a tape measure, how to actually read it, and go from there. So tape measure. Tape measures are basically graduations of a whole. I'm going to start off very simple. I'm going to grab this marker here. So 1 inch.
Yes, it is.
Now this is blowing up. So this is 0. This is your 1 inch mark. Right in the middle, you have the one that goes almost all the way through. What is that? That's a 1/2 of an inch. Half. Now from those other fraction equivalents, that is actually 0.5. So we're going to break that into quarters now. Now when I teach this face to face, typically what I use is I use a resemblance to money. So now we have 4 graduations. We don't have 2. So this would be 1/4. This would be 2/4. This would be 3/4. Or 3/4. Because now our tape measure is broken into graduations of 4s. We keep on going down. Now we have 1/8 of an inch. 1/8. Take that 0 out. 3/8. We also have what? 2/8 right there. Clean that up a little bit. So 1/8, 2/8, reduced down to 1/4, 3/8, 4/8, reduced down to half, 5/8, 6/8, reduced down to 3/4, and then we have 7/8. Memorize these two because you're going to be using your tape measure not only in this class, but when you get into your fabrication or even in one of your welding classes. And then typically we go down to 16ths. They're the lowest ones. So you have 1/16 here, 2/16 reduced down, 3/16, 4/16, so on. So 5/16, 7/16 here, 9/16, 11/16, 13/16, 15/16. So that's your basic tape measure that we're going to be using for this course and competency, and we're going to be using out in the lab. Go down, like I said, memorize all of these decimal equivalents because, like I said, a lot of the prints, they might be 0.375, so that's 3/8 of an inch. You can't find 0.375 on your tape measure if it's U.S. customary. So it's going to make it a lot easier. So broken down to 1/16 of an inch, that's what it looks like. Now typically when you start getting under and you go to 30 seconds, usually as a welder you may measure down to 30 seconds, but typically you have a 1/16 to 1/8 inch tolerance. Typically you're going to be using a 16 graduate tape measure, so it's going to be very hard to measure, so we kind of focus on 1/16 of an inch here. So how do we actually measure? So we lay this around here and say, here's my toe of my tape measure, and here's a piece right here. So what is this measurement here? So it lands right on there. So that is what? 5/8 of an inch. So wherever line that falls onto when you're measuring, that's what you measure it to. Now it's not always going to be under 1 inch, so I'm going to kind of do a break line here. You'll understand what that means. So let's say if this was 4, 3, just break all this down, 8, 16ths, so let's say if we have a measurement that falls right here. Well, that's our 1/2 inch graduate. So it would be 3 plus, because we have 3 holes, plus a 1/2 inch equals 3.5. Converted into 3.5. So go on, there's going to be a lot of exercises in here that we have for this unit that you're going to practice reading a tape measure and things like that. Even your test is basically focused on reading a tape measure, both metric, U.S. customary. Go through all the learning plans.